For the InfoWars Nightly News, I'm David Knight. It's Monday, December the 9th, 2013, and here are our top stories.
Tonight, a former ambassador to the UN warns of potential war between China and Japan. Then, Google's Schmidt wants a government monopoly on consumer drones. And a congressman demands that Obama rule by fiat. That's next on the InfoWars Nightly News.
They revel in their masses of weakness. They revel in their armaments against us. They revel in their red carpets. They revel in their Air Force One.
Well, as economic fundamentals are failing everywhere, governments around the world are pushing to get tighter controls of the media and pushing for war. The former Chinese ambassador to the United Nations has warned that the dispute between Japan and China over islands in the South Pacific could lead to World War III. He said it sounds somewhat alarmist, but this has also been talked about by Ambrose Evans Pritchard, who warned that Asia is on the cusp of a full-blown arms race. And, of course, we see that South Korea's defense ministry announced that it will impose its own air identification zone in the region, which overlaps those of Japan and China. What we have here is a Venn diagram for war, and the press in Japan is very alarmed about this as well, and John Bound has a report on how they view it.
The Japan Times notes, 5 out of 9 weekly magazines that went on sale last Monday and Tuesday contain scenarios that raise the possibility of a shooting war with China as soon as next year in response to Beijing's imposition of an air defense zone over the disputed Senkaku Islands. The Sunday Main Chi speculates that the communist superpower would utilize a false flag in the form of a civilian airliner being forced to land and passengers held hostage. Another scenario revolves around China targeting oil supertankers bound for Japan. If China were to target them, nothing could be worse to contemplate, wrote author Osamu Iya. Shuken Gendai, a weekly magazine sold by the largest publishing house in Japan, even speculated that Chinese President Xi Jinping could order the shoot-down of a Japanese civilian airliner, prompting a response from the United States that could lead to a fighter jet battle. Unlike Japan, the U.S. military would immediately respond to a radar lock-on threat by shooting down the Chinese planes. According to Saburo Takai, writing for Flash, China is intent on reclaiming the Senkaku Islands by force if necessary, but still fears a military confrontation with the United States, a concern emphasized by Beijing's failure to respond to America's provocative B-52 bomber incursion of the air defense zone last month. In recent months, the Chinese have boasted that their aircraft carrier task force rivals the U.S. Navy. In October, the PLA released a map of major U.S. cities and how they would be impacted by a nuclear attack launched from the PLA's strategic submarine force. And with bluster straight out of a science fiction novel, the Chinese media outlets announced plans to turn the moon into a Death Star capable of launching missiles towards any target on Earth.
The fate of China and the United States have become linked in a way far beyond what any of us could imagine. We are now facing a common challenge. And the challenge is how to build a world order for the first time in history on a global basis.
For Infowars.com, John Bound reporting.
Well, Russia is not known for its free press, but even though they have a lot of control, they're still pushing for even tighter controls. Today, Putin dissolved the state news agency and tightens his grip on the Russian media, according to Reuters. Leanne McAdoo breaks that down for us.
Russian President Vladimir Putin tightened his control over Russia's media on Monday by dissolving the main state news agency and replacing it with an organization that will promote Moscow's image abroad. Most Russian media outlets are already loyal to Putin, but the shakeup underlined the Kremlin's concern about the president's ratings and image and how vital they are for keeping Putin in power. What is this desperate need for world leaders to control the media? Japan just passed a State Secret Act last week, essentially banning journalism by threatening whistleblowers and journalists with lengthy prison sentences for divulging and reporting state secrets. Critics say the secrecy bill could restrict public access to information on a wide range of issues, including tensions with China and the Fukushima nuclear crisis. And as China becomes a dominant player in international affairs, the country has cracked down on granting visas for foreign journalists. And China has pressured publications such as Bloomberg to spike critical stories if they wish to maintain operations inside the country. But are these countries just following the Western model of a free press? Here in the United States, the president that promised to be the most transparent has been criticized for being the least transparent and the most aggressive when it comes to punishing leaks in an effort to control information. With a compliant media, leaders like Putin can retain their power. Japan can silence the hysteria resulting from a devastating nuclear reactor meltdown. And they can fast-track secret trade agreements that will destroy sovereignty without input from a meddling public. In order to maintain total control, rulers must control the message. And there is no doubt a war on for your mind. For the InfoWars Nightly News, I'm Leanne McAdoo.
Well, it's very important that we have a free and authentic media. If you remember back to August, when the government was pushing its narrative for war in Syria based on a sarin gas attack, we pointed out how the rebels had been known by both the UN, the Russian, and even American intelligence had confessed that they knew that rebels had the capability to produce sarin gas. It wasn't just a monopoly of the Syrian government. And amazingly, even though that was rolled back, we still have the media pushing back against any analysis that goes against the government's official story. We have a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist, Cy Hirsch, who cannot get mainstream media to publish his analysis of this false narrative that tried to push us into a war with Syria. It's reported today that corporate media ignores evidence of the CIA's al-Nusra responsible for a Syrian sarin attack. On InfoWars, we have this article. He told the Huffington Post that there was little interest for the story at the New Yorker. He then took it to the Washington Post. They did not respond to media inquiries. They did not want to publish it. Finally, it went to the London Review of Books. Yes, something where he's unpacking the lies of government that nearly pushed us into war. That gets buried not in any of the mainstream press, but on the London Review of Books. And you can read the analysis and see the link to his article at InfoWars. Now, there's a lot of talk in Washington about Obama as a dictator, finally. It's been a long time coming, but it is now out in the open, and you can dismiss a lot of this as just partisan politics. We see that Cruz, however, is making some pretty good points. He said that the Obamacare law says that big business doesn't get an exemption. The president just waved his hand and said, I'm granting them an exemption. Ignore that part of the law. I don't want to enforce it. And we've seen other congressmen point out that he's doing the same thing with immigration laws. He's doing the same thing with the laws that forbid lying to Congress, just letting James Clapper go. But this is something that's being talked about by law professors as well. We've got Jonathan Turley saying that Obama has become the very danger that the Constitution was designed to avoid, and that is the concentration of power in a single branch. But the left is not pushing back against these labels as Obama being a dictator. In fact, we see that the progressive branch of the Democrats are actually pushing him to be more like a dictator. We've got Congressman Keith Ellison and fellow progressives demanding that Obama set the minimum wage by fiat.
We in Congress will try to raise the minimum wage. We got opponents on the other side of the aisle who say that there shouldn't be no minimum wage. So we are in difficulty fighting these guys, but we know at the executive level, an executive order can change the situation. We demand it right now. Mr. President, sign the executive order.
Sign the executive order! Sign the executive order!
Well, there you hear the crowd of progressives chanting, sign the executive order, sign the executive order. In other words, rule by fiat, rule as a dictator. And while they're pretending to be the friend of the working poor, they are costing them their hours and in many cases their jobs through the Obamacare mandates, the hidden costs that the working poor may not see. They're going to hand them bigger salaries just in terms of the number of pieces of paper that they get without actually getting any increase in purchasing price because of inflation. That's what the government has been doing. That's why they're hurting at the bottom scale, hurting at the minimum wages because of the inflation from the Federal Reserve. And it is something where they're going to push essentially $27 billion in new gas taxes is what the Democrats are talking about. At the same time, they're talking about helping the working poor. They're going to nearly double the federal gas taxes. And then, of course, there's the super secret Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is going to complete the gutting of the economy, transferring even more wealth, even more power to this neo-feudal 1% of the 1%. So all this is being done behind the scenes while they're pretending to be the friend of the working poor. Now, Larry Pinckney breaks this down on an article on InfoWars today. Barack Obama's de facto totalitarian nation. He said the fact is that totalitarianism and fascism, in the words of Huey P. Long, have already incrementally come to America, not only wrapped in an American flag via false patriotism and corporate hegemony, but also aided and abetted by unprincipled and hypocritical gatekeepers who masquerade as so-called progressives. That's right, progressives like Keith Ellison, who no longer believe in a democratic republic and who want their president to enact their agenda by dictates, as a dictator. We'll be right back with more news about the corporate fascist police state. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now, the Washington Post has an amazing revelation today. They say the FBI's search for a fictional Mo suspect in bomb threats highlights the use of malware for surveillance. The FBI apparently has now told the Washington Post that they can report on the FBI using your laptop to spy on you. They say investigators have turned to a new kind of surveillance tool delivered over the internet. And the report goes on to say that the FBI has been able to covertly activate a computer's camera without triggering the light that lets the user know it's recording for several years now. Well, of course, when the FBI is ready for you to know that, they will give it to the Washington Post, even to the Blaze, and they will pretend that it's a new secret that they've uncovered. But this is something that Alex Jones has been telling you about for quite some time. And then there's this article from nearly 2 years ago entitled, "Alex Jones Was Right." This is above topsecret.com. They pointed out that Alex had been talking about spying via your webcam all the way back to 2008, and they linked to the old video there. And then from our archives in 2010, Big Brother was not just spying on school children through their laptops, and we have InfoWars referencing back to Alex Jones talking about this in 2006. Well, that's it for our news portion. Right after the break, we'll be talking to a former EPA scientist about the difficulty of using renewable energy on the grid. Stay tuned.
We're on the march. The empire's on the run. And the InfoWars army is standing strong. Wake up your family, friends, and neighbors and break the matrix at InfoWarsStore.com. Learn the truth and spread the message of liberty with the world's most comprehensive collection of books and documentary films. Maintain a healthy metabolism and energize your body to perform at peak health with Survival Shield Nascent Iodine. Protect your family and be prepared with survival foods and emergency preparedness kits. And now you can drink safe water with your own ProPure water filtration system, which removes fluoride and other harmful chemicals from your family's water supply. Save 10% with the promo code WATER. So join the revolution. InfoWarsStore.com.
But this has also been talked about by Ambrose Evans Pritchard, who warned that Asia is on the cusp of a full-blown arms race. And, of course, we see that South Korea's defense ministry announced that it will impose its own air identification zone in the region, which overlaps those of Japan and China. What we have here is a Venn diagram. The InfoWars Nightly News. I'm David Knight. It's Monday, December the 9th, 2013, and here are our top stories.
Tonight, a former ambassador to the UN warns of potential war between China and Japan. Then, Google Schmidt wants a government monopoly on consumer drones. And a congressman demands that Obama rule by fiat. That's next on the InfoWars Nightly News.
They revel in their masses of weakness. They revel in their armaments against us. They revel in their red carpets. They revel in their Air Force One.
Well, as economic fundamentals are failing everywhere, governments around the world are pushing to get tighter controls of the media and pushing for war. The former Chinese ambassador to the United Nations has warned that the dispute between Japan and China over islands in the South Pacific could lead to World War III. He said it sounds somewhat alarmist,